You know, in the high-stakes world of law, sometimes the absolute biggest battles hinge on the smallest, tiniest details. So what if I told you that a multi-year, multi-million-dollar trademark fight nearly collapsed, all because of a mistake that lasted just 3 days? Let's get into it.
So, our story involves two massive players in the pharmaceutical game, Sun Pharma Laboratories and Dabur India. I'm sure you've heard of them, but what you probably didn't know is that they were locked in a really serious legal battle over their brand identities.
And here is the heart of the whole thing. Sun Pharma owned the trademark for glucurid. So when Dabur went to register Dabur glucurid, Sun Pharma said, whoa, hold on, that is way too similar. They filed what's called an opposition, which is basically a formal challenge to stop Dabur's application. This should have been pretty standard stuff, but a tiny slip-up made it all incredibly complicated.
3. This is the number that almost tanked the entire case. Just 3 days, that's it. That was the mistake that put everything in jeopardy. It sounds like nothing, right? I mean, it's barely a long weekend. But in the world of trademark law, it was a potential bombshell.
So that brings us to the central mystery here. Can a simple procedural hiccup, a delay of just 72 hours, be enough to completely wipe out a legitimate legal case? Well, the answer is a lot more complicated and way more interesting than you'd think.
To really get how we got to this point, we need to look at the timeline. And trust me, it is a weird one. Okay, so check this out. Sun Pharma had until August 13, 2007 to get their evidence over to Dabur. They missed it by just 3 days. They sent it on the 16th, and then crickets. For almost 9 years, the case just sat there gathering dust. It wasn't until nearly a decade later, when Sun Pharma pushed for a hearing, that this tiny 3-day delay suddenly became a massive problem.
So when the trademark registry finally took a look, their decision was brutal, and it was fast. Because of that 3-day delay from 9 years earlier, they just said, nope, your opposition is considered abandoned. Case closed. Just like that, Sun Pharma had lost on a technicality. This, of course, forced them to appeal to the Delhi High Court, and it turned a simple delay into a huge legal fight.
So you're probably asking, how on earth could this happen? Well, the answer is buried in the legal fine print. The entire appeal, the whole case really, came down to how you interpret some very specific rules about these deadlines.
What's so wild is watching how the law itself has changed over time. The old rules from 1959, they gave the registrars some wiggle room to make exceptions. But the 2002 rules, the ones that applied to this case, got rid of that wiggle room, though they did allow for a 1-month extension if you asked for it. Fast forward to 2017, and even that extension is gone. You see the pattern here, right? The rules are just getting stricter and stricter.
And this slow tightening of the rules is what led to two completely opposite ways of looking at the problem. It set the stage for a legal showdown over one question. Was this deadline an unbreakable law, or was it more like a strong suggestion?
Now, Sun Pharma's lawyers came up with this really clever, kind of backwards argument. They said that by removing all the specific language about extensions, the law actually became more flexible. Their logic was that the 2-month period was no longer a hard deadline. It's a bold move, basically saying, hey, if you don't explicitly say we can't do it, then we can. But, of course, Dabur's team argued the exact opposite. They pointed to that trend we just saw, the rules getting tighter and tighter, and said it showed a clear-as-day intention to make these deadlines absolute, no exceptions. And this is what's so fascinating, right? Both sides are using the exact same evidence to draw completely opposite conclusions.
So with these two powerful but totally contradictory arguments on the table, it all came down to the Delhi High Court. How were they possibly going to untangle this legal knot? Well, their verdict came in two very surprising parts.
First, the court sided with Dabur. They looked at the history of the rules and said, yep, the time limit for filing evidence is mandatory, period. The whole point was to speed things up and stop endless delays. And at this point, you've got to be thinking it's game over for Sun Pharma.
And here's the twist. Even though the court ruled the deadlines were mandatory, they reinstated Sun Pharma's case. They didn't lose. So, wait, what? How is that even possible? How can a deadline be mandatory, but you can miss it and still be okay?
This is where the court got really smart. They drew a brilliant line in the sand. They said there are 2 separate steps here. Step 1, the most important one, is filing your evidence with the official trademark registry. And guess what? Sun Pharma did that on time. Step 2 is serving a copy to your opponent, Dabur. That's the part that was 3 days late. So the court decided that meeting the government's deadline was the mandatory part.
Being a little late sending a copy to the other guy? That was just a minor procedural oopsie, not a reason to throw out the entire 9-year case.
So this isn't just some quirky legal anecdote. This ruling sets a really important precedent for, well, for anyone who owns a trademark or deals with intellectual property. Let's break down the big takeaways here. So here's the bottom line. Deadlines for filing anything with a government body, like the Trademark Registry, they are ironclad. Do not miss them. But the court also showed that not all mistakes are created equal. A small delay in just letting your opponent know might be forgivable, as long as that crucial official filing was on time. This case is just a perfect example of how, in law, the smallest distinctions, like filing versus serving, can make all the difference in the world.
At the end of the day, this case walks a fascinating tightrope between the need for strict, efficient rules and, a little bit of grace for human error. It leaves us with a bigger question to think about. As our legal systems try to get more and more streamlined, how do we make sure they don't become so rigid that a simple mistake gets punished more harshly than the actual issue at the heart of the case? It's definitely something to chew on.